bitch. We the motherfucking boys. Dexter, YBI.
So, given what you're saying, then a Spence Crawford fight has no chance of happening as well.
None of these fights have a chance of happening. He is a cancer. As long as he is around, his fighters will be deprived of doing big fights. Period. End of statement. I mean, there's nothing I can do. I'm being very, very honest here. I said, I can't be that stupid. If there's so much money to be made, how wouldn't he sit down and try to negotiate a deal and so forth? But he won't do it because there's something wrong with him, and his fighters are suffering because of that. His fighters fight once a year, and if some other promoter wants to use one of his fighters, he says no, and he destroys it, and he shoots the guy 100,000, and he keeps him quiet. Something wrong, and you guys got to realize that.
We've seen periods of this happening before where promoters won't work promoters, and
nothing like this has ever happened.
I was going to get to that. Like, how do you gauge it with perspective?
Nothing like this has happened in the history of boxing. When King and I were going at each other, hammer and tong, we always found a way to talk, and very often from the talks, we made the fight. Sometimes we didn't, but very often we made the fight. There is something crazy about this man.
Well, that video right there was several years ago that you heard from Bob Arum. And I must say that I am not the biggest Bob Arum fan, but you have to recognize and analyze everything he said in this interview. And everything he said was absolutely true. Even though when Terrence Bud Crawford was signed to Top Rank and Arum said these very things, we all thought it was cap because we was too busy drinking the PBC Kool-Aid. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a black man. I support black business. But at some point, you have to look at the information being presented and make a judgment call. And we look at what's going on in the present. Forget the interview done several years ago. Forget this article that you see on the screen that was written in 2020. Why hasn't the fight been made? You know what? I used to like Earl Spence. I always liked Bud Crawford. But in the beginning, if you ask me which fighter I was leaning more to, it would have been Earl Spence. You know, Bud Crawford had his antics. He really don't talk to media like that. He don't speak to people. He's not fan friendly like Earl Spence. He just does his job and he goes home. That's not appealing to too many people. He has all the talent in the world, but Earl Spence was this golden boy that they put on the pedestal. And he's representing the state of Texas, the Dallas Cowboys. He had all the machines behind him to be successful, which he was successful. But he made statements saying he's going to clean up his side of the street, and then he's going to come together with Terrence Crawford and make the fight. He said he was his own boss. Al Heyman is just my advisor. So we had the fight with Ugas in April. Fast forward to now, we're in October. What is going on? It's no excuse that Earl Spence can spit out of his mouth to say why this fight has not taken place or been announced or been scheduled or been signed or any of that. It's blatant ducking. And then you got people on these channels saying, well, Earl Spence wants to fight, but his team doesn't. Bullshit. When two fighters want to fight, they get in that ring and fight. Deontay Wilder wanted to fight Tyson Fury for the second and third time. PBC did not. Deontay Wilder wanted that fight, and it happened. I can go on down the list of how many times this has happened. When fighters wanted to fight and they were being advised otherwise. So don't give me that shit. This article in front of you was wrote in 2020. Bob Arum says Spence is hiding behind Al Heyman and doesn't want the Crawford fight. Oh, is Bob Nostradamus? But he is certainly on point. Let's read this article from 2020. Let's just go and read this. If you see December 8th, 2020, written by Chris Williams. Bob Arum is blaming Earl Spence Jr. and his manager Al Heyman for the fight with Terrence Crawford not happening. Arum says the IBF/WBC welterweight champion is hiding behind Al Heyman to avoid making the unification match with the WBO champion Crawford. But everything that Bob Arum said was true. They don't want to make the fucking fight. I mean, he had all of you fooled. All you Earl sexuals out there. Fooled. Hell, they even had Terrence Crawford fooled because he thought himself that Bob Arum was the reason this fight wasn't getting made. So he left Bob Arum and tried to come over to PBC and sign with PBC so they can make the fight happen. And they straight shitted on the man. Made him look stupid for leaving Bob Arum. He had the highest guarantee when he was with ESPN at Top Rank of $3 million guaranteed off top. On the biggest sports network, fighting more than once a year, unlike PBC fighters. All he wanted was the Earl Spence fight. If they could have made it happen while he was still at Top Rank, Bud Crawford would still be with Bob Arum to this day. So you cannot fault and say Terrence Crawford is being stubborn and not trying to make the fight happen like some of you Earl sexuals are saying, because that's just simply not true. The plan was never for them to fight Terrence Crawford. Earl Spence knew this shit, and there's nothing nobody in the world can say. So today, I'm looking at it like this. If this fight doesn't get made, PBC will never get $1 out of my fucking ass again. Because it's just blatant ducking. And I hate to say that a man who's been training since he was a teenage years in a certain type of profession is scared of another man. But how else do you explain it? How else do you explain it? You give the man a low ball offer, no guarantee, rematch clause, he's still the B-side if he wins. All type of crazy, retarded shit. And you're going to try to push off Keith Thurman versus Earl Spence. Or you might even double down and try to save face by putting Boots Ennis in there with Earl Spence. But we know Terrence Crawford is not next. This is a shame, man. And I have to agree with Bob Arum. This shit is sad. PBC, you ought to be ashamed of your damn self. All you motherfuckers need y'all ass beat. Why is Spence so quiet? Why is he promoting fights for his fighter Frank Martin on via Twitter with Rolly and calling out people to fight? Why you not talking shit to Terrence Crawford? Why you not trying to pump up and sell the fight? And if you're trying to persuade your team to make the fight, you're gonna do certain things to throw the energy in the air to get the fight and get the ball rolling. You may release a tweet of y'all together or a picture of y'all together to get the interest, to build the interest. So you can say, oh, look, I got these many retweets, or I got these many likes on this picture. Show your team so you can persuade them to try to make this fucking fight. Spence and his team doesn't want to fight. And I put 95% of the blame on them. What you talking about, flat out? You tripping again, flat out. Why only 95? Who the other 5% go to? Well, the other 5% goes to Terrence Crawford. But you have fought too, my brother. You are too fucking quiet. Why are you not dragging this dude through the dirt? You done did everything by the book. You done kept the media and you done kept the negotiations out of the media, off social media, off Twitter, off all these other avenues, and the shit still ain't work. You left Bob Arum to make the fight happen, and it didn't happen. You played the nice guy. Now it's time to roll your sleeves up and get fucking dirty. If they got something you want, you got to act like you want it. You need to call this motherfucker out. Do some interviews. Talk down on the man. Get underneath the man's skin. Date his ex-baby mama. Do something. Because if the fight don't happen, I'm blaming both of you motherfuckers. And that's just flat out.